All right, story time. This story isn't easy to tell, so bear with me. In the mid-'80s, a young single mother, we'll call her Deanna, she had one son, we'll call him Joey. They had lived in this little rinky-dink two-bedroom apartment together. Deanna used to work graveyards as a dispatcher for a local law enforcement agency. At this time, Joey was on summer break, and it was in between his 6th grade and 7th grade year. One night, Joey had fell asleep in front of the TV, on the couch actually, and TV was left on, and other than that, nothing else was on in the house. Short while, Deanna came out, saw that he was sleeping, covered him up with a blanket, and kind of tucked him in. Joey woke up briefly, kind of looked up at his mother and smiled, and then turned around, nestled back into the couch. Deanna went back to bed. A short time later, Joey woke up because of a strange thump. Something had kind of crashed to the ground, and it was somewhat muffled. He sat up and he looked towards the hallway and kind of called out his mom's name. And his mom's door kind of squeaked open and then shut. So Joey gets up, kind of half asleep, staggers down the hallway. He didn't turn on the hallway light. He flicked on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the way from Deanna's room. Earlier that day, maintenance crew had went in and fixed the toilet, the insides of the reservoir tank, and one of them had left behind a large flathead screwdriver. Something had told Joey to pick that up. So he puts it in his hand, he flicks off the light switch, turns around to his mother's door, and he was hearing stuff that just didn't sound right. He wanted to be quiet, but at the same time, he had this feeling that something was way off. He puts his ear to the door, listens, and then slowly opens the door. When he opens the door, the only light is coming from Deanna's bathroom, and the door is slightly ajar, but it was enough light to see a man on top of Deanna with his hands around her, asphyxiating her. And the guy is shirtless, and he is sweaty, and he's dirty, and he's oblivious to the fact that Joey is standing at the doorway. So Joey, without thinking, runs and jumps on the bed and uses a screwdriver in such a way that the perpetrator releases his mother, falls to the ground, and starts to convulse and gurgle because of his wound. Deanna had rolled over and she was coughing violently, trying to catch her breath. And while all this is happening, Joey, in a state of shock, kind of backs up off the bed and walks backward all the way to the corner of the room and falls on his butt. Now, Joey's in shock, and he is terrified. His mouth is open like he's wanting to cry, but nothing's coming out. By this time, the perpetrator had expired from his wound. Deanna gains her composure, sees Joey, and runs over to hold him. Deanna says, "Shh, it's okay, baby, it's okay." Well, Joey had been crying, but there was nothing, no sound coming out of his mouth whatsoever. Once his mother showed that she was okay, and she's kind of stroking his head, telling him it's okay, you're okay, only then he was able to release whatever he had inside him. And he screamed and he cried uncontrollably. And he sat there and cried. Come to find out, that perpetrator wasn't just any old burglar. In a 3-year span, he had 8 victims in 3 different counties. He would break into people's homes. He would find an unsuspecting victim. He would unalive them, do inappropriate things with their bodies, and then he would clean up after himself, and then he would help himself to things around the house of value. The investigators had nicknamed him Necro Phil. And it seemed that he just didn't pick people at random. He had probably been stalking Deanna for a while and knew her routine, and he picked his time and he took it. Well, on that night, he met his match. So, can you imagine the trauma that young woman and her young son experienced that night, and how it would affect them the rest of their lives? Anyway, that story is in this book here. I Was a Bright Blue Bird. This is my number 2 story. Number 2 story that I published, but it was the first story that I ever wrote. And $10 on Amazon.